I think it's really often hard for us when we're overbooked and overwhelmed because we feel that exhaustion as a
Yeah.
result. It's hard for us to think, well, like I have to do the work to like cut
Mm,
back on the distraction. I have to
right.
like do the work and give attention and energy that I don't have to this process. But let me tell you
Mm,
from personal experience that that work of like kind of reorienting all that kind of stuff is less work than letting yourself get to complete burnout and then
right.
having to rebuild. Like it
Right.
really is. Like crashing down to nothing is so much harder than just sitting right now in your moment listening to this in your headphones and saying, I'm going to make some small changes today.
Hey, friends, and welcome back to this season of the Mary Marantz Show. If you are just joining us, this is a season we are lovingly referring to as the underestimated season, after the title of my third book, which just released this year, called Underestimated: The Surprisingly Simple Shift to Quit Playing Small, Name the Fear, and Move Forward Anyway. So, all this season, which we are officially now extending all throughout the rest of 2025, I am being joined by some amazing guests, some all time favorite past guests, and some brand new ones as we sit down and have the deep, hard conversations we love to have around here, all about the different faces of fear I cover in the book. Things like procrastination, people pleasing, imposter syndrome, self sabotage, second guessing, perfectionism, and more. And today I couldn't be more excited to be joined by my incredible friend Tara Sun as we welcome her to the show for the very first time to talk all about her brand new book, Overbooked and Overwhelmed. We'll talk striving, hustle culture, and how distracted work will never be our legacy. Deep work will. Tara, welcome to the show.
Mary, I'm so excited to be here. Also, that last sentence you said, can we like add that to the book? I know it's out
Yeah.
now, but can we like add that? Like, I love that. I'm so excited. It also is so fun because you're on my podcast not too
Yes.
long ago talking about underestimated. So, this is so
Yeah.
fun to get to hang out with you again.
Yeah, I know. We get to turn the tables today and
Yep.
just really dig into this. Real quick shout out, real fun quick shout out. The whole reason I got to be on your show is that our good mutual friend Rachel Autry made an
Yes.
introduction, and I actually had Rachel on recording this morning. You both have books launching on the same day, August 5th. So there's a lot of full circle moments happening right now.
There is. I keep texting her. We keep voice memoing, texting, when we can. Obviously, life is full, but we're like, how you
Yeah.
doing? Like,
Yeah.
because I feel like since
Right.
having the same book birthday, we're doing a lot of the same things. And she
Yeah.
has two little boys. I have two little boys. And we're like, how are we doing this? Are you
Yeah.
hanging in there? So it's such
Right.
a fun connection. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I kind of like my next sort of heading here says our days are busy, and we're going to talk about this concept of full you just
Yeah.
mentioned as well.
Yeah.
Reading just even for a quick second from the back cover before we even crack this book open to set the scene, you say, if ever had those days where every battery in your life is running low, every ping you hear is from someone who needs you, every item you cross off your list has three more to take its place. Let's face it, sometimes those days are every day. I feel that. I know you feel that. The book even opens with a scene of you crying and doing dishes at midnight. So
Yep.
drop us
Yeah.
right down into the middle of crying into your dishwater. Like
Oh my
what was
goodness.
happening? I know even we kind of need to talk about that in terms of sort of like the timelines of birthing books and birthing babies into the world. So
Yeah.
like what was going on?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So this was, like you said, probably 6 to 8 months postpartum after having my first son. So obviously that plays a factor.
Yeah.
But anyone listening to this, I think, can relate to that, no matter if you have kids or not, to crying over something like dishes or folding the laundry or just doing these simple menial tasks. And I remember I'm not very much of a night owl. I go to bed pretty early. And so the fact that I was doing dishes at midnight alone was really weird for my husband to walk in and see. So he asked me, "Hey, what's going on? Go to bed." I'm like, "I can't. I got to finish this casserole dish, this overflowing sink full of dishes." And he's like, "Why do you have to finish it?" And I said, "Because if I do, everything's going to fall apart."
Yeah.
And I remember saying that, and it was like the Lord hit me with a bag of bricks and was like, "Do you realize how crazy you just sounded?"
Yeah.
That what I admitted was revealing in my heart that I thought that everything was up to me, that
Mhm.
everything depended on me, and that if I didn't do something like dishes, which in the grand scheme of eternity is not a big deal at all, that everything was going to fall apart. So
Yeah.
that kind of started the ball rolling in my life where I realized, okay, it's not just about the things on my calendar or the things on my to-do list, there's actually something soul deep. There's things that I am believing falsely about God and about myself and about the world that I needed to rewire and get back to truth. And so that was really that turning point for me. But before, a lot of things had been brewing: postpartum, full lives, writing books, just regular things like trying to, work out regularly and eat healthy and cook meals for
Yeah.
my family, just like the stuff we have to do. So it was really just kind of like boiling, and that's when it came to a head.
Yeah, I love that so much. It reminds me of, this scene in my life, and I think I wrote about this in Slow Growth maybe. So I used to work, still very good friends with, we just haven't had a coaching call in a while, but used to work with a goals coach named Kim Butler from the White Boardroom, and what we used to do is, in addition to monthly calls, she would come up at the end of the year, and we would do, like, a recap of what had just
Yeah.
happened and, like, a look forward to the next year. And one of the things she would do is she'd have a big white board, big white piece of paper, and she'd write my name in the middle, and then we would write all the things, that I had accomplished throughout the year.
Yeah.
And it's full, just full, Tara. And I looked at her and I said, "Yeah, but it's the unhappiest I've ever been."
Wow.
And she
Wow.
kinda got, like, all fired up, and she's like, "Okay, we have to figure out," and she's, like, using her arms to kinda block out all the achievements, so it just says my name, like, "Who is Mary
Yeah.
without all these
Wow.
goals?" And, like, I knew what she was wanting me to say, but the only thing that flew out of my mouth in the moment was, "Nothing!"
Wow. Yeah, because you got to that point,
Nothing!
right? You're like,
Yeah,
yeah.
and it's, like, the same kinda energy. The whole world's gonna fall apart, right?
Yeah.
It's like we are inextricable, inextricable, I think that's the right word.
Yeah.
You cannot extract us, from our goals and
Yeah.
from being the one who always comes through, the one that everybody can count on and we
Right.
can't count on anybody else.
Right.
So, oof, do I feel all
Yeah.
of this,
Well, I
all of it.
say in the book too that most of us have good intentions. Like,
Yeah.
we get to be overbooked and overwhelmed because we have good intentions. Like, we want to serve people, we want to make a difference. Like I said, you want to be available, you want to pour out. As Christians, we have an eternal mission, a kingdom to work for. And so I think a lot of
Yeah.
times it's what drives us initially, but that doesn't always stay with us. Then we get to the point where
Yeah.
we're like, oh, wait, what am I doing all this for? And
Yeah.
that's when we start to like need to rebuild this. That's where I came from, where it's like I started doing this in the name of Jesus. I started doing this with good intentions, but like what happened, you know?
Yeah. Right. Yeah, and I don't know, I think, like, I at least me, I'll say I was wanting to say, like, every single one of us, we'll say at least me, at least you, probably most everybody listening, like, we know that feeling of this whole house of cards only works if we're, like, super cutting into the margins, right? If we're up until midnight doing this, if we're back up at 5 a.m. to finish it, like, we live in this, like, let's optimize our entire lives and, like, ice bath our way into,
Yes.
like,
Yeah.
whatever, our circadian rhythms and our
Yeah.
biohacking and whatever, and then, like,
Yeah.
our color-coded time blocking, um,
For real.
Pareto principle, whatever, Pomodoro principle, whatever. Um then it can feel like you actually need to get 2 hours of sleep if you wanna actually get all the things done you're supposed to get
Right.
done, which is exhausting, and you talk about this, you say, "Everyone I know is busy." It's rare to have a conversation with someone that doesn't include what we got done in a day, our demanding schedule, and how strapped we all are, and you go on to say, "Most of us understand the overwhelm from carrying a staggering number of responsibilities, demands, and to-do list boxes to be checked off every single day. We're expected to work a 9 to 5, hop on an important call, excel in our side hustle, pay the bills, fold the laundry that's been sitting in the dryer for 2 days. Oof, yes, sitting there right now.
Yep, me too.
Get dinner on the table, clean the house, wipe snotty noses, put the babies to bed, and sleep the recommended 8 hours. The list goes on. In countless ways, it feels like life demands every waking moment and every ounce of energy. And that, of course, brought to mind for me, and I'd love to hear you riff on it, this idea that it gets talked about a lot of the mental load,
Yeah.
that it gets put on women in particular, that we are sort of the keepers of the running,
Mhm.
constantly updating like Grand Central's arrivals and
Yes.
departures board of all the things that have to get done.
Yeah.
Um, what do you say to that? Is that women, not asking for help? Is it the control freak aspect that there's a right way to do it? Is it that we don't
Yeah.
want to have to ask? You should just know it needs to be done. Like what do you have to say about the mental load and its disproportionate impact on women?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of everything you just said.
Yeah.
I know for me, it's revealing that I am not asking for help is my main thing, and
Mm.
also that I'm not communicating. right? So I'm
Mhm.
not letting not just my husband, but the people in my life, my friends, because I'll say, my friends are just not checking in on me and they're just like not, but it's like, have you like asked them? Have you reached out? Like with really anyone in your life. And so that affects everything. That affects the
Yeah.
way that we show up. It affects our relationships. It affects how we stay present with God, right? Like
Mm.
we are already so overloaded in our mind and we can't. So then thinking about sitting down to be with God or sitting down to have a conversation with a human without like falling apart feels impossible because it's like our brains are so messy.
Yeah.
So, a big part of that is the release that you get to have, not just with God in prayer and surrender and submission and humility, but also with the people around you. Because I've
Yeah.
learned this, I've only been married for, 5 years, but I've already learned in that, like, Michael, my husband, cannot read my mind. Right.
Yeah.
And sometimes it comes out messy, and sometimes I don't do it perfectly, and sometimes I hurt his feelings, but like we share it and we try to
Mm.
share it so that at least he understands. Just, I'm going to be honest, a few minutes ago, we had a disagreement and we're like, wait, we both saw that differently. But like,
Hmm.
aren't we glad that we said it so that now we know where each other is coming from?
Right?
So I think that's a huge thing about the mental load. And then also, unfortunately, we as women just get used to it. We're just
Yeah.
like, well, it's how it is. That's how I have to keep going. But I really
Mm.
push back on that in Overbooked and Overwhelmed. It's like, we can reclaim what is ours in Jesus Christ, a
Mm.
sound mind and heart in Jesus Christ. It takes some elbow grease and some work, but it is ours. Like we don't have to become victim of it. And there's some things we can do about it.
Yeah, love that. That kind of brings me to like, I'm trying to think if this is the other end of the spectrum or just a different angle of this, but it's this article I read that was called The Burnout Generation.
Oof.
And it was talking about how, in this time where everything's sort of dinging and buzzing and demanding our attention, and we just have kind of a constant stream of information coming at us, that it sort of uses up all of our executive function.
Oof.
And
Yeah.
now you have this generation of people. The article was specifically talking about millennials, but I think it's honestly every living human right now,
Yeah.
where that shirt that needs to be returned in person in the store 6 months go by, that thing that needs to be dropped off at the post office, why does that feel so impossible? That inspection that takes 5 minutes for your car's emission test or whatever,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
it doesn't get done, but the article was talking about, like, that's because all of these other things have already, exhausted and burn out our executive function to the point that every little thing feels insurmountable.
Right.
So I'm trying to think if that's,
Right.
like, the opposite end of the spectrum of the mental load, or if it's like
Yeah.
we know all the things, it's just a matter of getting us to do the things.
Right.
But I don't know.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on the burnout generation?
100%. So what you said first really made me think of something else in the book too, is that what I've experienced and what I've heard from other people is that when we get to that point where it's like those little things feel so hard to do,
Mhm.
then we resort to like numbing out. We resort to like,
Yeah.
well, I'm just not going to do it. Or like, if that feels so impossible, I'm just not. Like, we're going to numb out. We're going to scroll into oblivion on social
Yeah.
media. We're going to get lazy. We're going to check out because that's easier, or at least we think it's easier in that moment than to
Yeah.
do the faithful everyday work to get back on track with
Yeah.
whatever or with God, like whatever that looks like. But we talk a lot about burnout in one of the chapters because burnout isn't just a physical thing. Of course, your body feels it in the way it holds tension, the way your nervous system is, the way that you sleep or don't sleep. But we can also experience burnout in our emotions, in our
Mhm.
mind, and also in our spirit. So we
Yeah.
talk a lot about how that affects our relationship with God. Like when we do not walk at a sustainable pace, which I'm not saying life is going to be this just really like steady, sustainable heartbeat. Like it's going to be wild. But like
Mhm.
there is a way to be able to walk at this sustainable pace amidst the crazy, but we're
Mm.
just not doing that. We're going to these really high highs, really low lows, extremes, running
Yeah.
really fast at a sprint and then collapsing and then doing it again. Like, I don't know if you've
Mm.
experienced that, Mary. I can assume because I feel like we're
Yeah.
similar in personalities, where
Yes.
so many times in my life I've sprinted like
Yeah.
all out, maybe too much, and then I collapse and
Yeah.
then I recharge and I'm like, now it's a good time to rest, right? Because I burnt
Yeah.
out. But then I
Yeah.
do it again. And
Mhm.
so there's also the piece of, like I said, we're not like learning to regularly rest and see the Lord and see the benefit in margin. You talked about that at the beginning. And so
Yeah.
we're stuck in the cycle of running like crazy, burning out, running like crazy, burning out. And it's just burnout is marking our story. And like that article, it's marking
Wow.
our generation. And like
Wow.
that
Yeah.
is a wake-up call for all of
Yeah.
us.
Yeah, I've totally experienced that and underestimated. I call that like all or nothing thinking and the cycle of motivation and defeat. But in that book, I'm talking about it more from like fear gets loud or you get scared of judgment,
Right,
so you
right.
you fall off again. This is a whole other side of that, of like you're not running at a sustainable pace,
Yeah,
and then you get really exhausted and you don't have the fuel to make it all the way up that mountain. So that's
it's true.
just a whole other side of that conversation. While you were talking, the thing that came up for me that's not even in my notes is a lot of times, especially people wired like us, when we can't keep up the pace by stretching into midnight and getting back up super
Mm,
early and it's still not working, our first instinct is not always to go, okay, some things have to go. I think our like the next place we usually go to is, okay, let me control freak my way into like the color
yeah.
coding and the batch
Yes,
scheduling. And
yes.
like if I just get the right planner, then it will all
Mhm,
fall into place.
mhm.
So I guess just speak for a while about like that's just another form of trying to be self-sufficient, or like that's still
Yes.
not going to, be the thing that satisfies.
Yeah.
Like that's just another way of numbing out in some ways.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I was actually talking to my mom the other day, and I'm sure she's fine with me sharing this. But we were talking about the book, and she was talking about one of the chapters she read, and she's like, I realized after reading this that one of the things that I often run to is like a vacation. I'm like, okay, if
Mhm.
I can just go on a vacation and kind of escape like what's
Yeah.
hard, then I'm going to be good for a while. She's like, but
Yeah.
like what I realized, although we're not going to demonize vacation, she's like, but what I realized is that when I come home, I might feel rested, but then like life happens again and I want another vacation. And so you're
Yeah.
speaking to this too, where it's like we go to, like, I mean, how many of us Google or search Instagram or TikTok, like when we feel stressed or overwhelmed, we're like, how to de-stress, or like, like even I say this in the book, there I have a
The
body wash
shampoo.
bottle
Yeah.
and it literally says that it's gonna cure my anxiety. I'm like, you
Amazing.
guys, I'm like, the marketing on all this stuff is insane. And so
Yeah.
I have just been so convicted by what I'm running to, right?
Yeah.
Because when we look for these temporary solutions, they may help in the moment, but
Mhm.
we all know this, it's not going to last. And we're just going to feel like we're stuck in the cycle of like looking for something that works and then it doesn't. And honestly, I love that you pointed this out, that we honestly don't look at letting go and we don't look at what we can cut back. Although cutting back, like we need to look in our souls too. But
Yeah.
often we think, let me add a new system, let me add a new bin, let me add a new, tool. But
Yeah.
like we don't realize how much that is actually cluttering our mind more,
Right.
whether it's just in our mind or our souls or adding physical things into our lives. And then the noise just becomes too loud. And then again, we get
Mm.
into that numbing cycle. So I just think it's
Yeah.
been really revelatory for me to realize like what I am allowing into my life, right? And
Yeah.
just seeing like what has the final say? What is really giving me that relief? Finding that in Jesus Christ first, but then being like, Lord, you've given us some really cool tools, right? Like I love
Yeah.
me a good planner. Like let's use that, but like always coming back to home base.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Talking about like sort of like, what we're gonna let go of, what we're gonna, prune back.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, there's a movie called Finding Normal, and in it they talk about pecan trees and how
Mm.
pecan trees left to their own devices will produce so much good fruit that they will literally split themselves in half. They will break their own backs
Wow.
in the
Wow.
name of carrying and holding and producing more good fruit, and that they
Wow.
have to be pruned back at the right time for their own, to save them,
Wow.
like to save them from themselves.
Yeah.
And you talk about in the book, you say we're looking for what Jesus calls the abundance life, the abundant life, John
Mhm.
10:10. But I wonder whether we've substituted the overcommitted life for that abundant life. And you go on, during my sobbing at the kitchen sink era, whenever someone asked how I was doing or what I was up to, my default answer was, life is full. Let's be honest, I probably even said those words in my sleep. I hoped people thought I was living a life of meaning and responsibility. I desperately wanted to prove that I was important and fulfilled, proudly wearing the label stressed out for Jesus as if it made me a holier Christian. And in that section, you point out that you stumbled upon the definitions of full and
Yeah.
that they're actually two very different ones. So, talk about that and just talk about this idea of what if it all feels like good fruit? Like how do we
Right.
even begin to know what to cut back?
Right, 100%. So I'm a nerd when it comes to word definitions, whether it's
Yeah,
just like
same.
basic or like if it's like Hebrew or Greek in the Bible. But I loved diving into the different definitions because you can be living a full life with no space, or you can be full as in you have everything. So like
Yeah.
adequate, I have all I need. But I think a lot of us live in the first definition where it's like, I have no space. I'm completely maxed out. And so what does Jesus get? What does the most important thing is in life get? Just the teeny little meager margins.
Mm,
Jesus gets our leftovers. And I
yeah.
want to live that John 10:10 life that Jesus really came to give, which means I have more than enough. I
Mm,
don't need to keep up with the world. That's what a subtitle is, that we're trying to keep up with the world, we're trying to keep up with everyone else, and then our relationship with Jesus is falling to the wayside. But when we have really grasped the true purpose and peace and joy and meaning in him, we don't have to like be in the cycle of proving. We're like, I have more than enough in Jesus. And when you're
yeah.
talking about the fruit aspect too, I've had to over the last couple years, and I think having kids has amplified this for me. Like, there's so many opportunities that I could be saying yes to, so much good fruit, so many good things that are happening. But even an abundance of good things can produce some negative results in our lives
Yeah.
where we start to maybe even see the work that we do start to dwindle in its
Mm,
excellency,
yeah.
because we're spread too thin. We have too many things on
Mhm.
our plate, even good things, but then our
Yeah.
work in those things is significantly reduced. So I've seen that in my life, and I've been really convicted lately, Mary, as I've had these conversations about the book, as I talk to people, and I'm like, you know what? I have to think about my witness too. I have to think about
Mm,
the way I'm showing up to my family and to the world around me. Like, I may frontward facing have a lot of things, a lot of fruit happening, but like,
mm,
how am I actually like achieving what God has for me? Am I cutting corners? Am I, like stressed out and anxious doing the good things, right? Like I've had to think a
yeah.
lot about that lately. And so it's really just asking the Lord, slowing down enough to ask Him, give me the wisdom and discernment to
Mhm.
say yes or no to whatever you have for me. Because what He has for you, He has for you, right?
Right.
And I think that's just been really key for me. But it is slowing down enough and listening to his voice, not the world's, to tell you which to say yes or no to,
Yeah.
because that has been really game changing. Yeah.
Wow, I love that. Something that came up for me when you were talking, and it literally just came up in real time, so I'm gonna try to unpack it in a way that hopefully makes sense. It definitely made sense in my brain, but that
Yep.
doesn't always
Yep.
make sense out in the world. Okay, so, the same energy that says full has to mean absolutely no margin or space left, I have to pack it to the gills, is actually very similar to the same energy of why we procrastinate.
Mm.
And we take what was a 6-week deadline or 6-month deadline and we sort of let it kind of,
Yeah.
train, pile up into
Yeah.
the back
Yeah.
end of it
Hmm.
is because it is so jam packed and so down to the wire and so under pressure and so, to the last minute. Nobody could blame us for sort of only doing like an A minus or
Yeah.
B
Yeah.
plus performance. Or if
Yeah.
we pull off an A plus, it's all the more impressive,
Mm.
because we don't want to deal with what it would look like to do truly excellent work
Right.
without that driving factor.
Wow.
Right. So there's something
Yeah.
about like my schedule's so full, I'm just like kind of pulling it off at the last minute.
Right.
Everybody's going to say, like that movie, I don't know how she does it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Instead of us having to say, what if I just did this one thing I'm being called to well?
Right.
Because there's this like underlying fear of like, what if I do that and it's still not enough? It's still not good enough.
Mm.
It's not
Yeah.
as good as I want it to be.
Right. Or, I mean, I know
Yeah.
you talk about this even too in your work. Like, what if I lose the momentum? Like, what if
Yeah.
I say no to something and ultimately yes to what God has for me, but then I lose out on this and I lose the momentum? And if I want to come back, can I come back? Like,
Yeah.
and I think that's a huge fear. I'm going to be honest, that's a fear about something I've been working through personally. I'm like, am I going to lose that? But
Mm,
ultimately, what we know, it's not a guarantee, but what we know with God is that He is the multiplier of our obedience, right?
yeah.
And so maybe that's financial, maybe that's in your time, maybe that's in your relationships, maybe that's in your personal health, but He will multiply in some way, right? And I just have to believe that, but
Mm,
we've seen that throughout scripture, we've seen that in our lives. And so, but that is a fear we have to address and
yeah.
kind of sit with and maybe be uncomfortable with, but realize it's going to be okay.
Yeah. Kind of bouncing back to our one liner from the intro for a second. We're going to come back around to that in a deeper way in a second. But
Yeah.
this is along the similar lines. You share a quote from John Mark Comer from the Ruthless Elimination of Hurry in your book that says, in the end, your life is no more than the sum of what you gave your attention to. And I
Ooh.
just wrote in my notes in bold and red, oof, that
Yeah,
hurts.
it does. Oh my goodness. I quoted
Yeah.
him so many times in my book. I love The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. I love anything. that John Mark Comer does. But that really stung because a big part of the opening of this book is, of course, we're talking about keeping up with God when life is full and being overbooked and overwhelmed. But the first thing I really felt strongly in including was distraction. And about
Mhm.
when you're distracted, it's not just like this menial thing. Like some people are like, it's not that big of a deal. It's fine. But it
Right.
actually reveals what we're craving. And in turn, it reveals what we're giving our time and attention to,
Wow.
right? So in
Yeah.
my most overbooked and overwhelmed seasons, I was giving my attention to everything but Jesus. I was giving my
Mm.
time to everything but rest and presence and all that kind of stuff. And it was really telling for me when I started to live the opposite. I'm like, wait, I'm like feeling lighter. I'm feeling a little bit
Mm.
freer. But we do have to reclaim our attention span. There is so many studies about how we're losing our attention span. It might be even less than a goldfish now, which is crazy
Wow.
and scary, right?
Yeah.
But so I think there's a lot of this conversation that we just kind of accept that life is life. That this is just how it's going to be. We have
Mm.
phones. It's the year of our Lord 2025. Like, what can
Yeah.
you do about it, right? But that's just not like our reality in Christ. And it's just like
Mm.
not what I want my life to be marked by. Someone who just
Yeah.
lays down and lets the world walk all over me. Like I
Mm.
want to get up and reclaim what's mine. But
Yeah.
it takes work, you know. But I
Right.
do say this, last thing I'll say, Mary, is that I think it's really often hard for us when we're overbooked and overwhelmed because we feel that exhaustion as a
Yeah.
result. It's hard for us to think, well, like I have to do the work to like cut
Mm.
back on the distraction. I have to
Right.
like do the work and give attention and energy that I don't have to this process. But let me tell you
Mm.
from personal experience that that work of like kind of reorienting all that kind of stuff is less work than letting yourself get to complete burnout and then
Right.
having to rebuild. Like it
Right.
really is. Like crashing down to nothing is so much harder than just sitting right now in your moment listening to this in your headphones and saying, I'm going to make some small changes today.
That's right. That's so good. That's so good and so true. Like burnout is not coasting off to the side of the road when you run out of gas. It's
Yeah.
hitting a brick wall at 90 miles an hour.
Oof. Yeah, that's
Fix it
good.
before the brick wall.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
100%. Talking about reorienting and refocusing, you say the solution isn't praying on our knees for more time. It's more soul deep than that. And you go on to explain that
Mhm.
it's about reorienting and refocusing. What does that mean? Like talk just from like kind of a practical standpoint of what that looks like.
Yeah, I think maybe, I don't know if it was in that section, but somewhere in the beginning of the book, there's a Martin Luther quote that talks about how he mentioned something like, I have so much to do in a day that I need to spend 3 hours in prayer.
Mm,
And while I don't,
yeah.
maybe he did, he probably did. But while you and I can't realistically maybe sit down for 3 hours straight, the
Mm,
point he was making in this was like, I have so much to do. The first thing I'm going to do to make sure that I can do it all well and with excellence and unto the
yeah.
Lord is getting with the Lord. Is being
Mm,
with him. And so that's the kind that quote has kind of changed my life where it's like we often say, I have so much to do. What are the systems? What can I do to do that? When often it's like, okay, it's soul deep, like you said in that quote. Like we first have to think about when we're reorienting and changing our direction and wanting to turn from this really distracted, overwhelmed life to more of a life that's present and just more at peace. We have to be really proactive about being honest about what we're giving our time to. I know we just talked about that, but being honest with what we are doing right now and getting an honest look, pen and paper, or in your mind, or with a loved one, being like, what am I actually giving my time to right now? And where can I make some subtle changes? Where can I make some subtle shifts? We even talk about in one of the chapters that we often box a lot of Jesus, a lot of our faith, a lot of the most important things in our life into one moment in
mm.
24 hours of a day. I know a lot of that's spent sleeping. Hopefully, some of that's spent sleeping for us. But we box them in and we're like, well, like, I only had 20 minutes this morning to spend time with Jesus. But like, where was your prayers in the carpool line? Where was reading a little bit of scripture on your lunch break? Where was, opening up the kids' Bible and reading it with your kids at lunchtime? Like, I just think that's a huge step too in reorienting and refocusing is realizing that like he's not just in one moment, he's in every single moment.
Yeah. Wow. I think I want to kind of like dig into a little bit the fear. We mentioned this kind of like the we're afraid we're going to lose our drive
Yeah.
if we get
Yeah.
do this work to get healed.
Yeah.
But I want to just sort of like hang out in that place of like what are we so afraid of if we stop being busy? I want to actually read from the book 161, page 161
Mary,
for
I love you. You're
anybody.
so prepared. I love this so much.
This is me.
It's kind of surreal. Like, I mean, you know this. You write a book and like you just throw it out there and you're like, Lord, have your way. But then when someone like has read it, you're like, Oh my gosh.
People actually read this. That's
Yes.
amazing. I love it. Okay, you're talking about, and this is also an interesting part of the conversation for us to have is some of us are wired this way from the
Right.
time we're little. You talk about you
Yeah.
as little ballerina Tara telling everybody
Yeah.
else to stop goofing off. I was like, that would so be me. Like, I
Yes,
totally get
yes.
that. Okay, you say now in adulthood, I've been unironically called Dash from The Incredibles because of how quickly I complete tasks, get things done, and produce
Mhm.
results. Most of my life has been lived in the fast lane, as the Eagles rock band would say. The type A achiever in me loves going, going, going. So when the idea of hustle culture and living a high paced life first emerged, it didn't take long for me to get hooked. I had been told that overworking, burning out, and running at a breakneck speed were unhealthy, but I didn't know why people said that. Hustle culture, intense productivity, and the continual strife excited me like nothing else. Every day was a race against my to do list and a challenge to see how much I could accomplish even in my free time. Whereas some people would look at a free day on their calendar as a blessing, I would frantically seek to fill it up with as much as possible. Doing, accomplishing, and remaining busy felt like the epitome of my calling. I felt like I was fully myself and fully centered in God's will when I was overworking, over accomplishing, and overbooking. In Underestimated, we call that a case of the overs.
Yep.
But now, as I look back, I realize that I had taken a bite out of Eden's apple and listened to the enemy's lies. I believed his whispers telling me that my greatest priority in life was to be busy. I learned the hard way that buying into this lie wasn't helping my relationship with God. I learned the hard way that I might have been busy, but I sure wasn't busy for the right reasons, for the God reasons. And so I wrote down, um, actually, even from a later part in the book, you say, for the first time in 2 years, this is after the launch of your first book,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
could hear myself think. I could hear the silence, but it was uncomfortable.
Mhm.
For the first time, I wasn't overbooked, and that terrified me.
Yeah.
What do you think? Go back to like put yourself in like that version of Tara 2 years post starting to write your first book.
Yeah. Yeah.
Silence, emptiness, margin, rest, they felt terrifying. Why do you think that was?
Because I felt like I was not contributing to not only the
Yeah.
world, but to the kingdom of God. I'm like,
Hmm.
well, if I get this sounds crazy, everyone's going to relate. I really thought, well, if I'm not doing something, then what's getting done? Right? It's coming back to what we said at the beginning. And I remember feeling so uncomfortable with that. But it was in that silence, it was in that white space that the Lord was speaking the whole time. I just was too busy to listen. But in that white space, it was like deafening. Like I could hear him and I could sit with not only like my fears, but also the things that the Lord was convicting me on, the
Yeah.
sins. Like,
Mm.
because we are so busy and we find so much of our worth in doing, achieving everything that you just read, that it's really easy to not hear from the Lord.
Yeah.
There's a passage that we talk about at the beginning of the book that Samson, there was literally this
Mm.
harrowing verse that he had become so distracted by a beautiful Philistine woman who, by the way, was literally a part of the people that he was called to defeat. Okay. So,
Mm.
like, he got so distracted that there's a verse that said that the Lord quietly departed from him and he
Hmm.
didn't notice.
Yeah.
So, that gives me chills right now because,
Me too. When I
oh
read
my
that in the book, I
gosh.
was like, oh, like,
Oh,
wait, there's no like
yeah.
blinking neon warning sign.
No,
You
like
just might quietly
the
depart.
Lord
Yeah.
quietly departed, and he didn't know
Wow.
because he was so distracted. But in that silence, I think it was really a grace from the Lord to be like, Tara, here's all that's going on. But let me tell you, for the person who doesn't like want that silence, who doesn't feel like that's something that they can even do, right? Like some people are like, I can't rest, I can't be silent, I can't be quiet. We just
Mm.
are resistant to it, right?
Yeah.
But we have to learn to be okay with that because that's where the Lord does a lot of really good work. I mean, scripture tells us about the hidden places, it tells us
Mm.
about the boundary lines have fallen for us in pleasant places. Like, can we say it's pleasant?
Hmm.
I mean, I used to not be able to say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. That's good. You followed up with that. You were talking about the moment I stopped running and stopped cramming, I realized the gaping hole in my soul. And this reminds me of there's a part in Dirt where I talk about feeling like I'm walking around with a hole in my
Yeah.
heart the size of like a root canal, the size of a chest wound.
Yeah.
And every time the cold air would hit just right, it would send these exposed
Ooh.
roots screaming back into,
Yeah.
full force. And that I tried to like backfill it with gold stars
Right.
and brand name labels and achievements and accolades. And it sounds like for me, and maybe you also have this for me where it's like A pluses and gold stars, it sounds like yours is like serving and helping and
Yeah.
like contributing and like ministry.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's like I feel like there's this part in the book, I don't know if I have it in the notes or not, maybe you'll know what I'm talking about, where it's like that hole in our soul we feel like we're walking around with, like that points to a deeper ache.
Yeah.
So just maybe like talk about like the hole in your soul and
Yeah.
what has started to make it ever feel full again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I didn't realize that there was a gaping hole until, like you said, there was a pause. There was like the wind that rushed in and it revealed that.
Yeah.
But I talk about in the book how Ecclesiastes 3, a lot of theologians think it was written by Solomon, which would make sense because
Mm,
he talks a lot about like, I've had everything in the world, money, riches, fame, women, all the things. But I've
yeah.
come to the end of my life and realized it's all vain. Right. And that would
Yeah.
make sense with Solomon. And so he talks about how we're really just aching for eternity, that none
Mm,
of this is gonna satisfy. Yeah, it's gonna bring some pleasure. Hey, I'm not saying don't go after your financial goals or have a relationship or any of these fun things in life, right? In the world, but not of the world.
yeah.
But we're confronted with that when the wind blows, that we were made for eternity and we're just longing. And so
Yeah.
it is, I had to realize through really, really uncomfortable times that I can enjoy those things, but like ultimately what keeps me steady throughout the just volatileness of life, that was the wrong way to say that, but throughout that is Jesus and in his word, and the fact that like no matter if I do, I'm still loved, I'm still seen. Even if I
Mm,
come to him with my pig slop on like the prodigal son, he still loves
mm,
me. He still sees me. He still celebrates and sings over me, just like the father did in that story. And the things
yeah.
that really brought me out of that were learning that rest was not a bad word, learning that I can work really hard throughout the week, but then enjoy rest. Creating with
Yeah.
my hands, getting out in creation, seeing that rest isn't just me being idle, but it's me finding these moments to pause and be in awe and be in
Yeah.
wonder. And
Mm,
that fills my soul because it's
mm,
not just, although it's so important, it's not just time in the word. It's time outside watching the wind blow through the trees, watching your
yeah.
dog have the best time ever at the park, watching your kids splash or creating sourdough or making a beautiful meal or getting
Mm,
around a table with friends that laugh and cry and share what's going on in their lives. Like that fills your soul because you see him in all of those moments.
mm,
But when we look to social media, to any of these other external things that we often run to for comfort, they're going to provide a small hit. But like when you actually get to experience those other things, your soul actually feels it. You feel like almost this like deep breath, like this sigh every single time.
mm,
And I'm going to say this last thing is that the more you do it, the more you want to come back to it. The first time you do, it's going to
yeah.
be hard. But the more you
Mm,
do, like I cannot wait to get to do that again. Like I look forward
mm,
to it and I make time for it. That's another part of the conversation. You make time for what is most important to you. And when your soul
yeah.
gets a taste, you're going to want more.
Oof, that's good. I just wanna, like, let that hang in the air there for a second. That's just really good. That's just really good. I feel like that
Mm,
feeling that we're all feeling after listening to that, like, I want us to be able to, like, hold on to it and remember it and, like,
yeah.
just, like, lock that into your memory, what that feeling
Yeah.
feels like.
Well, going back
I don't
to
wanna
like, which you read that part about, we bit into the apple just like Eve, but this sense of rest and presence and awe that we get when we fill our soul that hole, like that really truly is going back to the original Eden. And that's like
yeah.
what we're going back to in eternity. Like that's the taste God wants to give us. Like he does give us that experience, a taste of that experience here
Hmm.
to get us excited for what's to come, right? Because I
Yeah.
think we're overwhelmed and overbooked because we get a little too pigeonholed and thinking this is all there is, you know?
Yeah. Oof. Yeah, okay, so that actually brings me let's bring that back to the distractions we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
You say, "Friends, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it for you. Distraction uh, brought a crazy level of comfort and happiness. Brought me a crazy level of comfort and happiness. Binging Gilmore Girls for 3 hours after Hunter went to bed was my me time. Watching hilarious Instagram reels and admiring other people's aesthetic lives for hours on end entertained me like nothing else. Each pleasure met me with comfort, relaxation, and an escape when life was more than I could handle. But this is where it gets sticky. If we're being honest, a lot of us don't see distraction as a detriment to our souls. And then you go on to talk about the Matthew 16, verse 26 portion where Jesus says, "For what will it profit a man if he
Mhm.
gains the whole world and forfeits his soul?" And you just to kind of unpack it a little more, and then I want you to jump in. He knew the pull that the world would have on his followers. He knew the pull that the world would have on his followers. He knew that accumulation of temporary wealth, accolades, and other such distractions would ultimately prove empty. He loved his disciples so deeply that he wanted them to live abundant, undistracted, unhindered lives, and he wants the same for us. And so above, we were talking about distracted work will never be your legacy, deep work will. And I think there's something to be said for just sort of unpacking, like, can the good work that was prepared for us in advance ever become a distraction itself? You
Yes.
know, from spending time with God, or just the like urgent pursuit to try to make sure, there's this Oliver Wendell Holmes quote I talked about probably when I was on your show. It's been like rocking my brain. I
Yeah.
talked about it a
Yeah.
lot with Launching Underestimated. Most of us will go to our graves with the music still inside us
Oh,
unplayed.
yeah, you said
And
that.
that's
Yeah.
like driving me right now because
Yeah.
I'm like, I got music to play. Let's get it out into the
Oh,
world.
yeah.
And yet that urge to do, like you said, the good intentions um, can cause us to fill up our days and be as overbooked and
Yeah.
overwhelmed doing
Yeah.
the good work that was prepared for us. So it feels like there's got to be some like guardrails there that are also naturally built in from a God who would tell us, don't forfeit your soul. So how do we
Yeah.
know where the good work prepared for us in advance ends and us just like taking it to the extreme begins?
Right.
Because it feels like good work prepared for us in advance wouldn't turn into
Oof.
days lived like this kind of pace.
Yeah. Okay, one question that keeps coming to my mind.
Okay.
And so I'm asking you, I'm asking me, I'm asking all of us.
Okay.
If that good work prepared in advance for you, whatever that like looks for you in your season, like vocationally, in your job, like in your four walls, like whatever that is, whatever you consider that. Of course it's your whole life, but like there usually is like a job or a career or a situation that we feel like is really that good work that in our season. If that went away tomorrow, like absolutely crumbled, how would you feel? Okay, of course,
Nothing.
right? Let's go back to that.
I would feel like
Like,
nothing. No,
I mean,
truly though.
of course,
Yeah.
okay, take away the natural disappointment that you're gonna feel because even if
Mm,
you're, like, centered in God's will and you're not taking it to the extreme, you're gonna feel disappointed. It's gonna be sad because
yeah.
you love what you do, right? But, like, would you start to think, "Oh, no, what's gonna happen to me? What are people gonna
Mm,
think?" How I think those questions are really telling.
yeah.
Like, if our gut reaction is, like, about us and, like, not about, like, "Oh, okay, Lord, well, I guess
Hmm.
that's just not what you want me to do right now." I've had to ask
Right.
myself that.
Hmm.
Like, if everything contracts failed, if my accounts got deleted, if everything fell apart, how would I feel?
Mm,
Because that good work is not just my books or my podcast or how would I
yeah.
feel about that? And so I
Hmm.
don't even know how practical that is, but I think it's a good, like, starting point,
Litmus test. Yeah.
right?
It's a very good litmus test.
And I think that's
Yeah.
a lot of I think of a lot of there's just been many, leaders, prominent leaders in Christian ministry, pastors, social media people that have fallen hard,
Yeah.
like moral failures. So many
Mm,
coming out.
yeah.
And I can assume that at the root of that was pride. At
Yeah.
the root of that was complacency. At the root of that was compromise.
Hmm.
And so that's a lot of what we have to think about when we're leading our lives and doing that good work that was prepared in advance for us. It's like, is there
Yeah.
pride associated? Is
Hmm.
there compromise? Is there complacency? Is it all eyes on me? Is it the
Mm,
algorithm for my gain?
right.
Or is it just to do the good work, right? And then redefining what we think is good work, you know?
Yeah. That's good. That's good. Building off of distractions. You mentioned this earlier that they underlie cravings. Cravings are
Yeah.
behind the distractions. You talk about how pregnant women can sometimes crave dirt.
Yeah. I never
Wild.
did, but it's
Oh, good.
crazy.
That pregnant women can sometimes crave dirt. In true Mary form, I capitalized dirt because
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can't stop doing that. And how this mirrors how we too have a deep desire for something to satisfy a deficiency in our souls. What we crave or what we desire influences the way we live. What we value most in this life is what we give most of our time and attention to, like the John Mark Comer quote. And that sort of reminds me of like show me your calendar and your checkbook, and I'll
Mm.
tell you what's important to you kind
Wow.
of quote.
Yeah.
And I guess maybe speak a little bit to it now because you mentioned like life is wild and it's not we're not going to always just be strolling through meadows and,
Yeah, yeah,
pastures, whatever. So how do you think about this? Like, you're in the middle of a book launch when it's the volume and the speed and all of it is totally going to ramp up.
yeah, yeah,
So is there a built-in grace for this, or like a, Jess Connolly kind of calls it like low battery mode
yeah,
sometimes?
yeah.
Like, do you have a version of this for just seasons are just for a season, but they are going to be much busier?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, this had to be learned, but there's a lot of things I have to let go in. So if I'm like in the season of book launch, right? So really heavy on this kind of work, but then I have to realize, okay, what's most important to me? Of course, that's my faith, but then next is my family. Okay.
Mm,
So since I know it's really heavy on the work, on these commitments, I want to make sure that my family doesn't get the brunt of that. I still have to do the
mm,
work, but I also don't want to let my family down in some of those ways. So
yeah.
for me, that means sacrificing some things. Like we might not have the most glorious dinners as much as I love cooking home cooked meals.
Mm,
I only might do laundry twice a week. Like just some of those compromises that might hurt at first, but then when you realize, but when again, we're going back to that, but when I say no to some of those things and let them have a little more grace in that period, I get to spend more quality time with these people who ultimately give me more rest, fuel me
mm,
to be able to then go out and have these conversations. Like I just feel like it's a trickle effect, but it is
yeah.
kind of like I love the low battery mode. And it's also just being
Mm,
really honest with the people around you and saying, like, hey, I might not have the capacity for this right now, but it's a short season. My husband, I don't know why I thought of this, but I'll just bring this up too. There's a period of our life, kind of when I was writing this book, where I realized that like our weeks, I was booking something every single night or every single day. And my
yeah.
husband loves people, but he's more introverted. And so
Mm,
he's like, Tara, I'm exhausted. Like our
yeah.
boys are exhausted because we're out all, whatever we're doing. Like, can we at least be home like 3 nights a week or four and you
Mm,
could do the other half? But like just realizing also the effect that it has on the people around you, right?
yeah.
So I don't know why I
Right.
brought that up, but I just feel like that even is a good determinant for our family to be like, okay, what can we commit to this week? Have we already booked that
Yeah.
up? We're gonna stay with that, and then it helps me to show up better.
That's good. That's really good because, especially those of us who are wired with more drive and more ambition,
Yeah, yeah,
and we don't think too much about what we do to ourselves in terms of running ourselves ragged.
right.
But then that mirror gets held up of like, oh, you're doing this to the people you love the most too.
Exactly. Yeah.
They're casualties to all this ambition
Yes. Yeah. Because
and
it can be
rapid
selfish,
pace.
right? When you overbook
Yeah.
and you overwhelm your calendars, it can often be motivated by selfish reasons. And
Yeah.
that's not easy to hear, but I can say it because I've been there and I sometimes still do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I feel that. I feel all of that. Okay, so another question I had is you talk some in there about comparison. You have a few different cases
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
Sissy and
Yes. Good
Erica
memory.
and
Good memory.
um, social
Yes.
media comparison.
Yeah.
And one of the things I talk about in Underestimated is how we can over idealize others and how that even goes like a step beyond comparison, where we start to attribute to people these perfect records they don't actually have, or we
Hmm.
assume they would show up better than we would, or
Wow.
they would handle
Yeah.
it better than we would, or they would do it better than we would, or they wouldn't have made that mistake in the first place.
Wow. Wow.
So talk just about the role that like comparison and contentment and like a suit, the highlight reel and the
Yeah.
perfectly
Yeah.
curated, the house of cards where I only show you the card from this angle, not that
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
What role that plays in all of this, um,
Yeah.
this frantic, frenzied need to overbook
Right.
and overschedule.
Right. Right. I think we think, well, if she's doing it, then I can do it. Or if she's getting that result, I should be doing it. Right. So
Mhm.
that's a big and why I wanted to write a chapter about identity and about comparison. And I know that's talked a lot about in Christian cultures, but I wanted to do at least one dive into it because a lot of times we want to keep up with the world because we're like, well, they're achieving this, and we forget like where's my lane? Like where's
Yeah.
where God has for me. And when we compare so much, we forget that. Like
Mhm.
and when we want to live this life that is rested and present and purposeful, we can't do that when we're looking to other people to
Mhm.
measure up, when we're looking to other people's capacities. Because my capacity is not the same as yours is not the same as mine. Like we're in
Mm.
different seasons, we have different responsibilities, different people in our lives. And so how unfair of
Yeah.
us to do that to ourselves and to other people, to say that I can do the same thing that you can do and you can do the same thing that I can do. And so there's a
Mm.
big part that comparison plays in this, that we have to realize, no. We dive into First Peter 2 where it talks about who we actually are in Jesus. And when we know that, it makes it a little bit easier to combat that comparison, to say, you know what? She is chosen in Christ too. A fellow believer, she is, and she's walking that out in her way. And I am
Yeah.
chosen in Christ, but I'm walking it out in this way. And we just don't realize that comparison is a distraction as well, right? Because we might
Yeah.
find ourselves, and maybe you have too, Mary, where I'm like, I'm doing this thing that I said yes to, or I just decided to do. And I'm like, wait, did I even really want to do that?
Oh,
Am I even
yes.
good at this? But it's like,
Right.
why did I do this? Because I'm like, well, I have an extra hour every day. I should just do it, right?
Right.
But it's like,
I can, so therefore I should. Yeah.
oh, yeah. I think I did an Instagram post a couple years ago that people really liked, and it was like, even if you something like can doesn't mean you should, right? Or like the
Mhm.
things that you can do aren't always the God things, right?
Yeah. That's right. I have this like passage in Slow Growth that for some reason it kept coming up to put in the notes, and it kind of keeps coming up to bring up. So I don't know if it's for somebody or what, but I'm just going to read it, and it's sort of going to be our like setup question for the parting words you have
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
people listening. So the basically the post says this: on some level, all of us are walking around with this one fear, repeating in our minds like a steady drum beat, as soft and familiar as our own heartbeat, so imperceptible at times that we can almost forget it's even there, all the while thudding out what could possibly be the greatest disappointment of our days this side of heaven. I'm just afraid that my life will pass unnoticed.
Mm.
For many of us, we have spent the first decades of our adult life grinding out a good life. We traded our messy narrative for a pretty two-story house. We swapped our most hidden secret scars for a well-emblazoned handbag we want the world to see. We walked through the fire and came out the other side with our gold bands and golden retrievers. And we took this grit of ours and turned it into a favorite pair of pretty pearl earrings. We have spent years of our lives acquiring the right house, the right car, the right clothes, the right job, the right marriage, the right kids. All of this right we've done with our lives, only to watch it crumble. So maybe just for the person who's listening and they have been spending decades overbooking, overachieving, overscheduling, overproducing, and now overwhelmed, and also something has happened to them. They're in a season of their life where even after doing all that good and all that right, they're watching what they built crumble.
Mm.
Um, Maybe speak specifically to that line, will my life go unnoticed?
Yeah.
If I don't have all these things to show for it, if I'm not constantly filling my calendar, um, what what could you say to that person right now that would make them be noticed by you and by me, by us?
Yeah. Yeah.
That what they've done is not the sum of
Yeah.
who they are, is not the sum of what they've done.
Yeah.
We'll say.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I keep coming back to is not to erase you out of the equation, but I hope this gives you hope that when as believers, I believe this, when Jesus, I mean gospel tells us this, when God, excuse me, looks at us, he sees the righteousness of Jesus.
Mm,
He sees us, yes, but when it comes to the real meat and the matter and the eternity of our lives, he sees what Jesus has already done. And it's that old saying that we hear all the time, it's not do, it's done, right?
hmm,
Our salvation, our lives, it's not do, it's done. And
hmm,
so if you've watched everything crumble, you've lived this life for so long and you're feeling the guilt and shame about it, I want you to remember that even you shouldn't, but even if you don't do one more thing the rest of your life, if you're hidden in Jesus Christ, God already sees it done. Like he
yeah.
sees what Jesus has done on your behalf. And from
Mm,
that freedom, you can get up and do whatever he has for you and know that you are making a difference in the menial, in the magical, in the mundane, in the everyday moments. And I think that's powerful. I think there's probably
mm,
a lot of people that are maybe like kids out of the house, or they've retired or whatever, and they've achieved all this, and like, now what? Like, how can I contribute? You
yeah.
being a part of this life is
Mm,
contributing. You doing that small everyday faithful work is, I mean, from no pun intended, doing those deep work, those deep roots. I come from a farmer family. I come from a farming family. Like, the roots grow down and they're supposed to grow out, right? And
that's
it
right.
takes time and you don't see them. But what do you see when it's watered well and it's tended to well? Is a beautiful flower, a beautiful piece of produce at the end of this. Like, I
Mm,
just want you to know that when God looks at you, he does not condemn you. He does not shame
mm,
you. He just sees what's already done. And so do what you can to contribute to that. Know that you can't add to your salvation, but you also can't take it away. The things that are
yeah.
crumbling will not take away to your security or take away your security, you know?
So good. From that freedom, from
Yeah.
that place of worth. I love that so much. They're gonna want this book after this, Tara. So where do they find you,
Yeah.
it, bonuses, anything you want them to know
Yeah.
about? Let them know all the things.
Absolutely. Well, I am so grateful. I'm like kind of fangirling over how much you dove into the book, and I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for you. If
Yeah.
friends, if you love this and loved what was spoken about today, you can get Overbooked and Overwhelmed anywhere books are sold. It's a lot of
Yay.
books in there. When I post about this book, I'm like, I'm saying book a lot, but it's just in the title. But you can find that on Amazon, Barnes & Noble Christian Book, Walmart, anywhere books are sold. I also recorded the audiobook. So if you're
Yay.
overwhelmed and overbooked and you're like, I can't sit down to read a book, let me read it to you on Audible. So you can
Nice.
grab that as well. I'm on Instagram at Miss Tara Sun every day. And then I also have a podcast called Truth Talks with Tara. And please go listen to the episode with Mary. It was so good.
Yes, love it. And we will link all of that up. All right, friends, the book is Overbooked and Overwhelmed: How to Keep Up with God When You're Just Trying to Keep Up with Life. It is out now everywhere books are sold. Get this in your hands. Get it for a friend who could really use it. And for now, I want to leave you with these words from Tara. Growth happens little by little, moment by moment. The day you plant the seed isn't the day you see the bloom. The little choices we make each day, saying yes to either devotion or distraction, add up. My prayer for you and me is that we would not be overwhelmed by the road ahead, but so overwhelmed by the love and presence of God who walks with us on that road. Until next time, friends, this is the Mary Marantz Show, and welcome to your underestimated season.